I'm Ingrid, 32 years old, and 3 weeks ago, I discovered my entire life was a lie, written in my dead father's own handwriting. My father passed away on a Tuesday. I was the one holding his hand when he took his last breath. My sister Meredith was in the Hamptons. My mother was in the waiting room, too emotional to be present. At the will reading, surrounded by relatives I barely knew, the lawyer announced my inheritance, $1. My sister received $2.4 million, the house, and everything else. But 3 days later, while cleaning out Dad's study, I found a hidden drawer. Inside was a letter dated the day I was born. The first line read, "I never wanted a second daughter." I kept reading. By the last page, I understood everything. Before I continue, please take a moment to like and subscribe, but only if you genuinely connect with this story. And drop a comment telling me where you're watching from and what time it is there. I always love reading those. Now let me take you back to 4 weeks ago, the night my father was admitted to the hospital. I was finishing up a late shift at work when my phone buzzed. Mom's name on the screen. She never called unless she needed something. "Your father's in the hospital, heart attack. You should go." No, please. No, I'm scared. Just a command. I asked about Meredith. "Your sister's in the Hamptons with friends. She can't make it back tonight." Of course she couldn't. "What about you, Mom?" A pause. "I'll be there in the morning. It's late and I need to make some calls." I didn't argue. I'd learned decades ago that arguing with my mother was like screaming into a void. I grabbed my keys and drove. 4 hours through the dark, the highway stretching endlessly ahead. My hands gripped the steering wheel so tight my knuckles went white. I kept telling myself this time would be different. This time maybe he'd finally see me. When I arrived at the hospital, the fluorescent lights buzzed overhead like tired insects. A nurse directed me to the ICU. I walked past rooms filled with families, people crying, people praying, people holding hands. My father's room was quiet, just the rhythmic beeping of machines. He looked smaller than I remembered. The man who had towered over my childhood, whose approval I had chased for 32 years, now seemed fragile under those sterile white sheets. I pulled up a chair and sat beside him. "Hey, Dad. It's me, Ingrid." His eyes fluttered but didn't open. I took his hand, something I hadn't done since I was a little girl. His skin felt papery, cold. "I'm here," I whispered. "I came." The machines beeped on. Outside, the hospital hummed with life. But in that room, it was just me and the father, who had never once told me he loved me. And I waited. 3 days. That's how long I stayed by his bedside. Meredith called once. "How's Dad? Is he conscious?" "Not yet. The doctors say it's touch and go." "Okay, keep me updated. I have a charity luncheon tomorrow, but I can try to rearrange if—" "It's fine, Meredith, I've got it." She didn't push back. Mom visited a few hours each day. She'd sit in the corner, scrolling through her phone, occasionally sighing. Never once did she offer to take over so I could rest. During those long nights, memories surfaced unbidden. My college graduation. I'd scanned the crowd for my parents' faces, finally spotting them rushing in 20 minutes late. Meredith had needed a new car that morning, and they'd taken her to the dealership first. My 16th birthday. Dad forgot entirely. When I reminded him at dinner, he pulled out a $20 bill and slid it across the table. "Buy yourself something nice." That was it. No cake, no song, just a crumpled bill and the sound of Meredith laughing about her new laptop. On the second night, a nurse stopped by to check his vitals. She looked at me, dark circles under my eyes, same clothes from the day before, and said, "You're a wonderful daughter staying with him like this." I didn't know how to respond. Was I wonderful? Or was I just desperate? On the third night, Dad stirred. His eyes opened, clouded with confusion, scanning the room until they landed on me. "Meredith?" he whispered. I swallowed hard. "No, Dad, it's Ingrid." His eyes drifted shut again. And in his sleep, he murmured a name, just one name over and over. Meredith. Only Meredith. I held his hand tighter and pretended I didn't hear. The next morning, he woke up lucid, and for the first time in my life, he looked at me like he wanted to say something important. Ingrid. His voice was barely a rasp. I leaned closer. The desk, he said. My study. There's something... He coughed, a wet, rattling sound that made my stomach clench. What is it, Dad? What's in the study? His hand squeezed mine with surprising strength. You need to see. The drawer. The hidden... The monitors began to beep faster. A nurse rushed in, then another. Someone called for a doctor. Dad, stay with me. Dad, stay. His eyes locked onto mine. For one brief moment, I saw something there I'd never seen before. Regret? Guilt? I couldn't tell. I'm sorry, he breathed. I'm so... The machine screamed. The room flooded with medical staff. Someone pulled me back, away from his bed. Sir? Mr. Farrell? Stay with us. But he was gone. At 3:47 a.m., my father died with his hand reaching toward mine and a sentence left unfinished. I stood frozen in the corner while they recorded the time of death, while they turned off the machines, while silence filled the space where his labored breathing had been. When I finally called Mom, she cried, but her first words were, "Call your sister, Meredith needs to know." Not, "Are you okay?" Not, "I wish I'd been there." I called Meredith next. She answered on the fourth ring, her voice groggy. Meredith, Dad's gone. A pause. Then, why didn't you call sooner? You know I have a meeting at 9. I hung up without answering. Outside, the sun was rising. A new day. A world without my father in it. I should have felt grief. Maybe I did. But mostly, I felt that familiar emptiness, the hollow space where his love should have been. And echoing in my mind, his unfinished words, the desk, the hidden, the funeral was a spectacle. Harold Farrell had been a respected businessman. Over 100 people filled the church, colleagues, golf buddies, distant relatives I'd never met. Everyone had a story about what a great man he was. I sat in the second row. The second row. Behind cousins I saw once a decade. Behind my mother's friends from her book club. Meredith stood at the front with Mom, receiving condolences like royalty greeting subjects. They wore matching black Chanel. I wore a dress I'd bought at a department store 5 years ago. When it came time for the eulogy, I stood up. I'd prepared something, memories, gratitude, the kind of speech a daughter should give. Mom's hand shot out. Let Meredith handle it. You know how you get nervous in front of crowds. I opened my mouth to protest. Please, Ingrid, not today. I sat back down. Meredith delivered a beautiful eulogy. She cried at all the right moments. She spoke about Dad's wisdom, his generosity, his unconditional love for his family. Unconditional. I stared at my hands. After the service, as people milled about offering hollow comfort, a woman approached me. Older, maybe early 60s, with sharp eyes and silver hair pulled back severely. You're Ingrid, aren't you? I nodded, trying to place her face. I'm Helen, your father's sister. Sister? Dad told me his only sibling died years ago. I see Harold kept up the lie, Helen said, her voice bitter. He cut me off 25 years ago for asking too many questions. She pressed a card into my hand. Call me after this circus is over. There are things you need to know about your father. Before I could respond, she disappeared into the crowd. I looked down at the card, a phone number, and 3 words written beneath it. Don't trust them. 3 days later, we gathered in a law office that smelled of leather and old money. Mom sat at the head of the long mahogany table, Meredith beside her, with her husband Greg on the other side. A handful of relatives filled the remaining chairs, people I recognized from the funeral, all watching with barely concealed interest. I sat at the far end near the door. The lawyer, a gray-haired man named Mr. Patterson, adjusted his glasses and began reading. To my beloved wife Vivian, I leave the summer cottage in Cape Cod and a monthly allowance to be managed by the estate. Mom dabbed at her eyes with a handkerchief. To my daughter, Meredith Farrell Collins, I leave the family residence at 47 Oakwood Drive, valued at $1.2 million. Additionally, I leave my investment portfolio, currently valued at approximately $800,000, my savings accounts totaling $400,000, my vehicle collection, and all jewelry and personal effects not otherwise specified. Meredith squeezed Greg's hand, her expression carefully neutral. Mr. Patterson cleared his throat, shuffled his papers. To my daughter, Ingrid Farrell. The room went still. I leave the sum of $1. Someone laughed. A short, sharp sound quickly stifled. I felt every eye in the room turn toward me, some pitying, some amused, some satisfied. Mom stared straight ahead. Meredith examined her manicure. Is that all? My voice came out steadier than I expected. Mr. Patterson nodded. That is the entirety of the estate distribution. I stood up. My chair scraped against the floor, loud in the silence. Thank you for your time. I walked out without looking back. But as I reached the elevator, I heard it, a cousin's whisper, meant to carry. Not surprised. She was never really one of them anyway. The elevator doors closed, and I finally let myself breathe. The desk, the hidden drawer. Maybe it was time to find out what Dad had been trying to tell me. I drove to my parents' house. No, my mother's house now, later that afternoon. I told myself I was just picking up some old belongings. That's what I told myself. Mom answered the door in her bathrobe, looking every bit the grieving widow. Ingrid, I didn't expect you. I need to get some things I left here. She stepped aside reluctantly. The house felt different already, emptier, even though nothing had been moved. I made it halfway to the stairs before I stopped, turned around. Why? Mom froze. Why what? 32 years. I need to know why. What did I do wrong? Her face tightened. This isn't the time. Then when is the time, Mom? When will it ever be the time? She sighed, suddenly looking very old. Your father had his reasons. You should accept that and move on. What reasons? I was there every day at the hospital. I held his hand when he died. Meredith didn't even cancel her luncheon. Your sister has responsibilities. And I don't? Mom's eyes hardened. There are things you don't understand, things better left alone. So explain them to me. But she was already turning away. Get your things and go, Ingrid. Some questions don't have answers you want to hear. I watched her disappear into the kitchen. Every instinct screamed at me to follow, to demand the truth. But I knew that look. That wall. I'd been running into it my whole life. Instead, my eyes drifted down the hallway, to the closed door at the end. Dad's study. The door was slightly ajar. I could see the corner of his old oak desk through the gap. The desk. The hidden drawer. Mom was in the kitchen. The house was quiet. I had maybe 10 minutes before she noticed I hadn't left. It was enough. I slipped into the study and closed the door behind me. The room smelled like him. Leather, cigars, old paper. I'd rarely been allowed in here as a child. It was Dad's sanctuary, off limits to everyone except Mom and, occasionally, Meredith. The oak desk dominated the center of the room. Massive, antique, passed down from my grandfather. I'd always thought it was beautiful. Now it felt ominous. I started with the obvious drawers: bills, tax documents, old photographs of Meredith at various achievements, graduations, award ceremonies, her wedding. Not a single picture of me. Nothing unusual, nothing hidden. Then I noticed it. The bottom right drawer was shallower than the others. I pulled it out completely, felt along the base. Wood panels that should have been flush were slightly raised. My heart pounded. I pressed down on one corner. Click. A false bottom. I lifted it away with trembling hands. Inside, a yellowed envelope, a leather-bound journal thick with age, and a larger manila envelope sealed with wax. The yellowed envelope caught my eye first. handwritten on the front, in my father's careful script. A date. My birthday. The day I was born. 32 years ago. I opened it and unfolded the letter inside. The paper crackled, brittle with age. The first line hit me like a punch to the chest. I never wanted a second daughter. I couldn't breathe, couldn't move, could only keep reading. One heir is enough. One heir is all this family needs. When Vivian told me she was pregnant again, I wanted to end it. She refused, so I made a decision. If this child must exist, she will not take anything from Meredith. Everything, every opportunity, every dollar, every ounce of love, belongs to my firstborn. The second daughter is merely an accident I will tolerate. Nothing more. The letter continued. I didn't stop reading until I heard footsteps in the hallway. I grabbed everything and slipped out the back door. I sat in my apartment until 3 in the morning, reading. The letter was just the beginning. The journal, 30 years of entries in my father's handwriting, told the whole story. When I was 5. The younger one asked why she can't take ballet like Meredith. I told Vivian to say we can't afford it. She believed me. Good. When I was 10, Ingrid wanted piano lessons. I told her only serious musicians deserve them, and she's not talented enough. She cried. She'll get over it. When I was 18, she wants to study medicine. I told her I'd only pay for accounting, something practical, close to home, where I can keep her in line. She agreed. She always agrees. When I was 25, she mentioned moving to Seattle for a job. I reminded her that if she leaves, she can expect nothing from the will. She stayed. Every major decision in my life, every time I'd given up a dream, every time I'd chosen to stay small, stay close, stay obedient, he'd orchestrated all of it. And Mom, the journal made it clear, was his enforcer. Vivian knows her role. She understands that if she shows the second one too much affection, there will be consequences. I've made the terms of our arrangement very clear. I wanted to scream, to throw the journal across the room, to call my mother and demand to know how she could have. But there was still the manila envelope. I broke the wax seal. Inside, a formal document, old but preserved. The header read, Last Will and Testament of Robert Farrell Sr. My grandfather's will. The one Dad told me was lost years ago. I read it, then read it again, and suddenly, everything made sense. Grandfather hadn't left everything to Dad. He'd left it to be divided equally among all his grandchildren, all of them, including me. My father had stolen my inheritance before I was old enough to know it existed, and I had proof. I called Helen at 7 in the morning. She answered on the second ring like she'd been waiting. I found it, I said without preamble. The will, the journal, everything. A long exhale on the other end. I knew he kept records. Harold was always meticulous about documenting his own cruelty. We met at a diner an hour later. Helen looked tired but unsurprised as I spread the documents across the table. Your grandfather Robert was a fair man, she said, touching the old will gently. He loved all his grandchildren equally. When he died, he made sure his estate would be split among them. That included you, Ingrid. Even before you were born, he'd included provisions for any future grandchildren. But Dad told everyone the will left everything to him. Because Harold destroyed the original and replaced it. Helen's jaw tightened. I was suspicious from the start. When I confronted him, he cut me off completely, told the family I was mentally unstable, greedy, trying to steal from him. 25 years, I whispered. You've known for 25 years? Suspected. I never had proof. She tapped the document in front of me. But you do now. I stared at my grandfather's signature. The real one, not whatever forgery Dad had used. What do I do with this? Helen pulled out her phone. I know someone. Marcus Webb. He was your grandfather's lawyer. He drafted this will. Harold told everyone Marcus died years ago, but... She smiled grimly. Harold lied about a lot of things. You think this lawyer will help? I think Marcus has been waiting 25 years for someone to find this. She slid a phone number across the table. He'll want to hear from you. For the first time since this nightmare began, I felt something other than despair. I felt hope. Marcus Webb's office was in a small building on the edge of town, the kind of place people forget exists. He answered the door himself, a thin man in his late 60s with kind eyes behind wire-rimmed glasses. "You must be Ingrid." He shook my hand warmly. "You have your grandfather's chin." The three of us, Marcus, Helen, and me, sat around a cluttered desk covered in legal books and old files. I handed over the documents. Marcus studied the original will for a long moment. When he looked up, his eyes were wet. "This is it, the will I drafted." He ran his finger along the margins. I recognize my own notations. I remember writing every word. "What happened?" I asked. "After my grandfather died?" Marcus removed his glasses, rubbed his eyes. "Harold called me the day after the funeral. Said he'd found a newer will in Robert's safe, one that superseded mine. When I asked to see it, he threatened me. Said if I didn't back off, he'd have me disbarred, accused of fraud." "And you believed him?" "I had no proof otherwise." Marcus's voice was heavy with old guilt. "He was Robert's son. He had control of all the documents. What could I do?" Helen leaned forward. "But now we have proof." Marcus nodded slowly. "The handwriting experts can confirm this is Robert's signature, not a forgery. And the journal." He flipped through the pages I'd brought. "Harold essentially confessed to everything in writing." "So what's next?" I asked. "Next." Marcus met my eyes. "We can challenge the estate distribution, file in probate court. With this evidence, we have a strong case." He paused. "But Ingrid, you need to understand what this means. You'll be going up against your mother, your sister, your entire family." I thought about 32 years of silence, of being invisible, of accepting scraps and calling it love. "I know," I said. "I'm ready." Meredith called 3 days later. I knew it would happen eventually. Word travels fast in families like ours. "Ingrid, sweetheart." Her voice dripped honey. "I've been hearing some troubling things." "Have you?" "People are saying you're asking questions about the will, about Dad." A delicate pause. "I understand you're grieving, but you need to let this go." "Why?" "Because it's embarrassing. For all of us. Dad made his wishes clear and—" "Did he? Did he really?" Silence. When she spoke again, the sweetness was gone. "I don't know what you think you've found, little sister, but I have friends, lawyers, people who can make your life very difficult." "Is that a threat?" "It's advice, from someone who cares about you." She laughed, that tinkling, dismissive sound I'd heard my whole life. "Come on, Ingrid. What do you really think you're going to accomplish? Even if there was some irregularity, who's going to believe you over me? Over Mom?" I kept my voice steady. "Thanks for your concern, Meredith. Think about what you're doing. That's all I ask." She hung up. I sat there, phone in hand, heart racing. She was scared. I could hear it beneath the threats. Meredith Farrell Collins, golden child extraordinaire, was actually scared. 10 minutes later, my phone buzzed again. "Mom." "Ingrid?" Her voice was small, shaky. "I need to see you. There's something I need to tell you." "About what?" A long pause. Then, barely a whisper. "About the letter. About what your father made me do." I gripped the phone tighter. Whatever I'd expected, it wasn't this. "When and where?" "Tomorrow. The cafe on 5th Street. Come alone." She hung up before I could answer. My hands trembled. Mom wanted to talk, after 32 years of silence. Something had changed, and I wasn't sure if that was good or terrifying. The cafe was nearly empty. Mom sat in a corner booth looking smaller than I'd ever seen her. No makeup, no jewelry, just a worn cardigan and hands wrapped around a cold cup of coffee. I slid into the seat across from her. "You came," she said. "You asked." For a long moment, neither of us spoke. Then Mom's shoulders began to shake. "I know about the letter, Ingrid. I've always known." My throat tightened. "Then why?" "Because I was a coward." Tears spilled down her cheeks, carving tracks through foundation she hadn't bothered to apply. "When I married your father, I had nothing. No money, no family, no options. He gave me everything, and he made sure I knew he could take it all away." "So you went along with treating me like I didn't matter." "He said," she choked on a sob, "he said if I showed you too much affection, he'd divorce me. Leave me with nothing. Tell everyone I was crazy like he did with Helen." I thought of all those years, the cold looks, the dismissive comments, the way she'd flinch whenever I reached for her hand. "Did you ever love me?" The question hung between us. "Every day." Mom finally met my eyes. "Every single day, Ingrid. I was too afraid to show it. I wanted to scream at her, to rage about the mother she should have been. But looking at her now, this broken woman who'd sacrificed her own daughter to survive, all I felt was exhausted sadness." "Did you know about Grandpa's will?" She shook her head. "Harold never told me anything about the finances. I just did what I was told." My phone buzzed. A message from Daniel at work. "Check Facebook, now." I opened the app and my blood ran cold. Meredith had posted in the family group a long message painting me as unstable, greedy, trying to steal from grieving relatives. The war had officially begun. Okay, let me pause here for a second. If you're watching this, and you've ever felt like the invisible one in your family, like no matter what you did, it was never good enough, I see you. I really do. Drop a comment and let me know. Have you ever had to stand up against people who were supposed to love you unconditionally? What gave you the courage? And if you're feeling this story, hit that subscribe button. We're just getting to the part where everything starts to change. Now back to what happened next. Within 24 hours, my phone became a battlefield. Texts from relatives I hadn't spoken to in years, each one more cutting than the last. Aunt Edna. "Ingrid, I heard what you're doing. How could you? Your father just died." Cousin Mark. "This is really low, even for you. Trying to steal from your own mother?" Uncle Robert Jr. "Your father had reasons for what he did. You should respect the dead." I scrolled through Meredith's post again. She'd written it carefully. Concerned older sister, worried about her troubled sibling who was lashing out in grief. Comments poured in with support for her. "So sorry you're dealing with this, Mare. Family drama is the worst. Stay strong." Some people just can't handle not being the favorite. That last one stung more than I wanted to admit. My friend Daniel found me at my desk the next morning staring at my screen. "Hey!" He pulled up a chair. "You okay?" I laughed bitterly. "My family thinks I'm crazy, or greedy, or both." Daniel leaned in. "You know what I think? Innocent people don't need smear campaigns. If Meredith had nothing to hide, she wouldn't be working this hard to make you look bad." He had a point. That evening, a certified letter arrived at my apartment, from a law firm I didn't recognize. "Dear Ms. Farrell, our client, Meredith Farrell Collins, has retained our services regarding your recent defamatory statements about the Farrell family estate. We hereby demand that you cease and desist all claims, public or private, regarding the distribution of Harold Farrell's assets. Failure to comply will result in legal action for defamation and intentional infliction of emotional distress." They were trying to scare me into silence. I set the letter down and picked up my phone. "Marcus, it's Ingrid. We need to move faster." Dr. Patricia Huang was one of the most respected forensic document examiners in the state. Marcus called in a favor to get us on her schedule within the week. Her office was clinical, white walls, bright lights, and a desk covered with magnifying equipment. She spread out the documents we'd brought. My grandfather's original will, the one Harold had filed with the probate court, and several samples of both men's handwriting. "Give me an hour," she said. "The longest hour of my life." Helen paced the hallway. Marcus sat rigid in his chair. I stared at my hands and tried not to hope too hard. When Dr. Huang finally emerged, her expression was unreadable. "The original will." She held up my grandfather's document. "This signature is genuine. The pressure patterns, letter formations, and natural variations are consistent with your reference samples of Robert Farrell Sr.'s handwriting." My heart stuttered. "And the other one?" Marcus asked. Dr. Huang's eyes hardened. "The signature on the filed will shows clear indicators of forgery. Hesitation marks, inconsistent baseline, unnatural pen lifts. Someone traced this signature, carefully, but not carefully enough." "You're certain?" I asked. "I would stake my professional reputation on it." She handed me a thick envelope. "My official report, with documentation. This will hold up in court." Marcus exhaled slowly. "We have enough to file." The relief nearly knocked me sideways. Proof. Actual documented proof that my father had lied, forged, stolen. But Dr. Huang wasn't finished. "There's something else. Your father's journal." She pointed to a specific entry. "He refers to his wife knowing about the arrangement and keeping silent. That's corroboration." "Meredith," Helen said suddenly. "If Vivian knew, Meredith might have too." I thought of my sister's threats, her panic. What else was she hiding? I had one way to find out, one move that would put everything on the table. "Marcus, I want to call a family meeting." The night before the family meeting, I sat alone in my apartment with the lights off. Dad's journal lay open on my lap. I'd read it so many times the pages were wearing thin, but tonight, I needed to read it once more. Entry from when I was 10. The girl asked why Meredith gets a bigger Christmas than she does. I told her Santa knows who deserves more. She cried herself to sleep. Vivian asked if we could get her something extra. I reminded her of our agreement. Entry. From when I was 16. Ingrid brought home a scholarship application today. Wants to apply for an art program across the country. I threw it away and told her she wasn't talented enough. She apologized for wasting my time. Entry from when I was 20. She's dating someone, a boy who wants to take her to California. I reminded her that if she leaves, she's on her own. No safety net, no family. She ended it the next week. I closed the journal and let myself cry. Not quiet tears this time, great, heaving sobs that shook my whole body. 32 years of manipulation. Every dream I'd let go. Every choice I'd made to stay small, stay close, stay obedient. None of it was because I wasn't good enough. It was because I was never allowed to be. When the tears finally stopped, I felt something new. Not anger, not grief. Resolve. Tomorrow I would face my family, not with vengeance, with truth. They could choose to accept it or not. But I would no longer be silent. I picked up my phone and sent one last email. "Meeting confirmed. Sunday, 2 p.m., Mom's house. I'll be there." Then I turned off my phone, lay down, and slept more peacefully than I had in weeks. The storm was coming, and I was finally ready for it. Mom's house felt smaller than I remembered. The living room was packed. Mom sat on the main sofa, looking frail and uncertain. Meredith beside her, legs crossed, expression cool. Greg stood by the window, arms folded, not meeting anyone's eyes. And scattered around the room, aunts, uncles, cousins, people Meredith had invited as support, witnesses to what she probably expected to be my public humiliation. "Well," Meredith's voice cut through the murmur, "we're all here. What's so important that you dragged everyone out on a Sunday?" I stood near the fireplace, my bag at my feet. "Thank you for coming." I kept my voice steady. "I know Meredith has told you her version of what's happening. I'm here to tell you the truth." Aunt Edna scoffed. "We already know the truth. You're trying to steal from your sister. No, I'm trying to reclaim what was stolen from me. The room stirred. I saw glances exchanged, skeptical, uncomfortable, curious. This isn't about money, I continued. It's about our father, about who he really was, about decisions he made 32 years ago that none of you know about. Meredith laughed, high and sharp. This is pathetic, Ingrid. You're embarrassing yourself. Am I? I reached into my bag and pulled out a yellowed envelope. I found this in Dad's desk, a letter he wrote the day I was born. The room went still. Would you like to hear what it says? Meredith's smile faltered. Mom's hand flew to her throat. I unfolded the letter, hands steady, and began to read. I never wanted a second daughter. Silence. Absolute silence. I kept going, and with each word, I watched the room's expression change from skepticism to shock. No one was laughing now. I read the key passages from the letter. Then I opened the journal. This is 30 years of entries, all in Dad's handwriting. I held it up for the room to see. 30 years of documenting exactly how he planned to cut me out of this family. Meredith stood abruptly. This doesn't prove anything. Anyone could have written that. A forensic handwriting expert has verified every document. I set the report on the coffee table. Would you like to see her findings? No one moved. But that's not the most important thing I found. I pulled out the manila envelope, the one that had been sealed for decades. This is our grandfather's will, the real one, the one Dad told everyone was lost. Uncle Robert leaned forward. What do you mean, the real one? I mean, grandfather left his estate to be divided equally among all his grandchildren, all of us. I looked around the room. Not just Meredith, all of us. Murmurs rippled through the crowd. Aunt Edna's mouth fell open. Dad forged a new will. He hid the original. He stole inheritances from every person in this room. I opened the journal to a specific page. And he wrote about it, right here in his own words. The original will has been destroyed. No one will ever know. Meredith's face had gone white. You're lying. Am I? I met her eyes. Then explain this. I pulled out the last piece, the printout of an email. This is correspondence between Dad and you, Meredith, from 5 years ago, where he explains everything and asks you to keep it secret. Greg straightened from his spot by the window. What? Your wife has known the truth for 5 years. I handed him the printout. She chose to say nothing. The room erupted. Greg staring at Meredith in horror, relatives shouting questions, Mom sobbing into her hands. Through it all, Meredith stood frozen. For the first time in her life, she had no words. I gathered my documents calmly. I'm not here for revenge. I'm here because everyone in this room deserved to know who Harold Farrell really was. I headed for the door. Behind me, Meredith finally found her voice, but it came out as a scream. You can't do this to me. This is my family. I paused, hand on the doorknob. No, Meredith, it's ours. And for the first time, I'm claiming my place in it. I didn't leave right away. Part of me needed to see what happened next. The living room had devolved into chaos. Greg was backing away from Meredith, the email printout crumpled in his fist. You knew? This whole time you knew and you said nothing? I didn't. It wasn't. Meredith reached for him. Greg, please, let me explain. Explain what? That you let your sister be treated like garbage for years while you took everything? It wasn't my fault. Dad made me promise. And that makes it okay? Across the room, Aunt Edna had cornered Mom. Vivian, is this true? Did Harold really do all of this? Mom couldn't answer. She just kept crying, shaking her head, looking 20 years older than she had an hour ago. Cousin Mark was reading the journal entries over Uncle Robert's shoulder. I heard him mutter, Jesus Christ, under his breath. And everywhere, whispered conversations, glances in my direction, some apologetic, some stunned, some still disbelieving. Then Aunt Edna approached me, the same woman who'd sent me that cutting text just days ago. Ingrid, her voice was rough. I I didn't know. None of us knew. I understand. No, you don't. She gripped my hand. I'm sorry. We all should have seen it. We should have asked questions. I nodded. That was all I could manage. Behind her, Meredith was still pleading with Greg. He wasn't listening anymore. I caught Mom's eye across the room. She looked at me with an expression I couldn't quite read. Shame? Sorrow? A plea for something I wasn't sure I could give? I turned and walked out the front door. Helen was waiting by my car. You okay? I took a breath. The autumn air was crisp, clean, nothing like the suffocating atmosphere I'd just left behind. Yeah, I said. For the first time in 32 years, I think I actually am. I was almost at my car when I heard the front door open behind me. Ingrid, wait. Mom's voice, small and broken. I stopped but didn't turn around. Heard her footsteps on the gravel driveway, hesitant and slow. Please, just one moment. I turned. She looked like a ghost of herself, mascara smeared, hands trembling, the perfect widow's facade completely shattered. Can you ever forgive me? The question hung in the cold air between us. 32 years. All those birthdays spent wondering why I wasn't enough. All those nights crying in my room while Meredith got everything I ever wanted. All those times I'd reached for my mother's hand and she'd pulled away. Mom. My voice came out steadier than I expected. For 32 years, all I wanted was for you to love me. I worked so hard, did everything right, tried to be the perfect daughter, and the whole time you knew. You knew he was doing this to me, and you chose him. She sobbed. I was scared. I was your daughter. I was scared too. I was just a child, Mom. I needed you. She had no answer for that. I don't know if I can forgive you, I said. Maybe someday. But right now, what I know is this. I don't need your approval anymore. I don't need Dad's approval. I spent my whole life trying to earn something that was never being offered. I took a breath. I was always worthy of love. I just happened to be born into a family that couldn't give it. Mom's knees buckled. She sank onto the porch steps, crying too hard to speak. I walked to my car. Helen opened the passenger door for me. You did good, she said quietly. I know. I slid into the driver's seat. For the first time, I actually know. We drove away and I didn't look back. 2 weeks after the family meeting, Marcus filed the lawsuit. The local paper picked up the story. Prominent family faces estate fraud allegations. There was a photo of Dad from some charity gala, smiling that distinguished smile I'd grown up fearing. Meredith hired a team of expensive lawyers, the kind who bill more per hour than I make in a week. They sent threatening letters, demanded we withdraw, promised to bury us in motions and counterclaims. Marcus wasn't intimidated. Let them posture, he said during our strategy meeting. The evidence is overwhelming. We have the original will, verified signatures, and Harold's own journal confessing to everything. No amount of legal maneuvering can make that disappear. The discovery phase was brutal. Depositions, document requests, hours spent in conference rooms while lawyers asked the same questions 50 different ways. Meredith testified first. I watched through a video feed as she denied everything, her voice cracking under pressure. But when they showed her the email, the one proving she'd known for 5 years, she broke down completely. I was just protecting my family, she sobbed. I didn't know it was illegal. Helen squeezed my hand. She's lying. She knew exactly what she was doing. Maybe. Or maybe Meredith had spent so long living in Dad's shadow that she couldn't tell the difference between protection and complicity anymore. The news spread through our social circles. Old friends of my parents stopped talking to us. The country club membership was quietly revoked. The Farrell name, once synonymous with success and respectability, became something people whispered about at dinner parties. Then one morning, I received an unexpected email. From Gregory Collins. Subject: We need to talk. The message was brief. I have something you need to see. Meet me. Greg. Meredith's husband wanted to talk to me. Alone. Greg looked like he hadn't slept in days. We met at a coffee shop across town, somewhere neither of our families would think to look. Thank you for coming, he said, sliding into the booth across from me. Your email was cryptic. I know, He ran a hand through his disheveled hair. Since the meeting, I've been replaying everything. 10 years of marriage. All the things Meredith said about you. All the times I believed her. I waited. She told me you were jealous, unstable, that you'd always been difficult, and your parents had done their best with you. I never questioned it. His laugh was bitter. I never questioned anything. What changed? Greg reached into his jacket and pulled out a flash drive. After you left that day, I started looking. Meredith has a folder on her laptop, password protected, but she used our anniversary. Another bitter laugh. Inside were years of emails between her and your father. And this. He slid the drive across the table. What is it? Proof that Meredith didn't just know about the will, she helped cover it up. There are documents, bank transfers, coordination with lawyers to suppress any inquiries. Greg's voice cracked. She wasn't just a bystander, Ingrid. She was a partner. I stared at the flash drive. Such a small thing. Such enormous implications. Why are you giving this to me? Greg met my eyes. Because I filed for divorce this morning. And because I spent 10 years married to someone who watched her own sister suffer and did nothing. I can't change what I didn't see, but I can help you now. He stood to leave, then paused. For what it's worth. I'm sorry. For all of it. He walked out. I sat there for a long time, turning the flash drive over in my hands. One more nail in the coffin, and I hadn't even had to hammer it myself. Okay, I need to pause here for a moment. When Greg handed me that flash drive, I genuinely didn't know what to feel. Vindication? Sadness? Relief? I want to ask you something. Have you ever had someone surprise you by doing the right thing when you least expected it? Someone you'd written off, who turned around and stood up when it mattered? Let me know in the comments. And if you're still with me, thank you. We're almost at the end now. Hit subscribe if you haven't yet. You won't want to miss how this all wraps up. Meredith called me 3 days later. No honey in her voice this time, just raw desperation. We need to talk. Please, Ingrid, just give me 10 minutes. We met at a park near her apartment, her new apartment, since Greg had kept the house in the divorce filing. She was sitting on a bench when I arrived, and I barely recognized her. No designer clothes, no perfect makeup, just a wrinkled sweater and dark circles under her eyes. Greg left me. Her voice was flat. He took everything he could, the evidence, the files, all of it. I sat down beside her, leaving space between us. I know. She flinched. So that's it? You've won. You got everything you wanted. This was never about winning, Meredith. Then what? She finally looked at me, and I saw tears building. What do you want? I'll give you money, half of everything, more than half. Just, please, drop the lawsuit, let this end. You think this is about money? Isn't it? I laughed. Not cruelly, just sadly. No, it was never about the money. Then what? I want you to admit it. I turned to face her fully. Look me in the eye and tell me the truth. You knew what Dad was doing. You knew for years, and you never said a word. Meredith's face crumpled. For a long moment, she didn't speak. Then, in a voice barely above a whisper, I knew. I knew everything. And I was too selfish to care. The confession hung between us. Why? I asked. I'm your sister. She wiped her eyes with the back of her hand. Because I was scared that if I spoke up, I'd end up like you. The invisible one. The one nobody wanted. I let that sink in. Then I stood. When you're ready to take responsibility, really take it, you know where to find me. No, I walked away without looking back. The courtroom was packed. Word had spread about the Farrell family scandal, and everyone wanted to see how it ended. Reporters lined the back rows. Former friends of my parents sat scattered throughout, pretending they weren't there to gawk. I sat beside Marcus, Helen on my other side. Across the aisle, Meredith hunched between her lawyers, looking smaller than I'd ever seen her. Mom didn't come. I wasn't surprised. The proceedings moved faster than I expected. Marcus presented our evidence systematically: the original will, Dr. Huang's expert analysis, the journal entries, the emails. Each piece built on the last until the picture was undeniable. Meredith's lawyers tried to object, tried to introduce doubt, but there was too much proof and everyone knew it. The turning point came when Greg took the stand. He testified calmly, professionally. Yes, his wife had known about the forged will. Yes, she had actively helped conceal it. Yes, he had evidence: emails, documents, bank records. When he finished, you could have heard a pin drop. The judge called a brief recess. I stepped outside for air and found myself face to face with Aunt Edna. "I just want you to know," she said quietly. "I believe you. I think most of us do now." Before I could respond, the bailiff called us back. The judge didn't make us wait. He'd reviewed the evidence, consulted with experts, considered all arguments. "It is the ruling of this court," he said, "that the document filed as Harold Farrell's will was obtained through fraud and misrepresentation. The original will of Robert Farrell Sr. is hereby reinstated. The estate will be redistributed according to its authentic terms." Relief crashed over me like a wave. It was over. After everything, the lies, the manipulation, the decades of being invisible, it was finally over. Marcus shook my hand. Helen embraced me. And across the room, Meredith sat motionless, staring at nothing. I found Mom on a bench outside the courthouse. She hadn't come inside, but she'd been there the whole time, waiting. I sat down beside her without being invited. "It's done," I said. "I heard." Her voice was barely audible. "I listened from the hallway." We sat in silence for a while. People passed by, conversations swirling around us like water around stones. "I don't expect you to forgive me," Mom finally said. "I know I don't deserve it." "What do you want, then?" She turned to look at me, really look at me, maybe for the first time in decades. "I want you to know that I loved you, every day, even when I couldn't show it." Her hand trembled as she reached toward mine. "I know that doesn't fix anything. I know I failed you in every way a mother can fail." "Then why didn't you ever protect me?" "Because I was weak." The word came out like a confession. Harold controlled everything: the money, the house, our social standing. When he threatened to leave me with nothing, I believed him. I was so scared of being alone that I sacrificed my own daughter. Tears streamed down her face. "I'm not asking for forgiveness, Ingrid. I'm asking, is there any chance? Any chance at all that we could start over?" I thought about it, really thought about it. Could I forgive her? Could I trust her? Could we build something real from the ashes of 32 years of lies? I didn't have answers, but I knew one thing. "I can't promise anything," I said slowly, "but I'm willing to try, if you are." Mom's hand closed over mine, warm, real, the first genuine touch between us in longer than I could remember. "I am," she whispered. "I promise I am." It wasn't resolution, it wasn't healing, but it was a start. 3 months after the verdict, I heard from Meredith again, not through lawyers this time, just a text, simple and direct. "Can we meet?" She'd moved to a small apartment on the edge of town. Gone were the designer furnishings, the art collection, the evidence of a privileged life. What remained was sparse and practical: a couch, a table, some boxes she hadn't bothered to unpack. She opened the door looking like a different person. Thinner, quieter, something in her eyes that hadn't been there before. "I wasn't sure you'd come," she said. Neither was I. We sat across from each other at her small kitchen table. She offered coffee. I accepted. "The divorce is finalized," she said, wrapping her hands around her mug. "Greg got the house, most of the assets. The prenup was not in my favor once everything came out." I didn't know what to say, so I waited. "I've been seeing a therapist." She almost laughed. "First time in my life. Turns out being the golden child messes you up too, just differently." "Is that supposed to make me feel sorry for you?" "No." She met my eyes. "It's supposed to explain, not excuse, just explain." She set down her mug. "I knew what Dad was doing. I knew, and I chose to keep quiet because I was terrified of losing my place. Of becoming you." Her voice cracked. "That's the ugliest truth. I watched you suffer, and I told myself it wasn't my problem. So what now?" Meredith took a shaky breath. "Now I try to be someone different. I don't expect you to forgive me. I don't deserve it. But I wanted you to know I'm sorry for all of it." I looked at my sister, really looked at her. "I can't forgive you yet," I said. "But I'm not going to spend my life hating you either." It wasn't closure, but it was something. 6 months later, my life looks completely different. The estate was settled. I received my share, not the millions Meredith had inherited, but enough. Enough to pay off my debts, enough to put a down payment on a small condo, enough to finally feel like I could breathe. But the money isn't what changed me. I started therapy. Real, honest, twice-a-week therapy where I unpacked 32 years of being told I wasn't enough. It's hard. Some days I leave those sessions feeling like I've been turned inside out, but I'm learning about boundaries, about self-worth, about the difference between earning love and demanding respect. Mom and I have lunch every other week now. It's awkward sometimes. We're both learning how to be honest with each other after a lifetime of silence. She's not the mother I always wanted, but she's trying to be the mother she should have been. Meredith sent me a birthday card last month. First one ever. Inside, she'd written, "I'm still figuring out who I am without Dad's shadow. I hope you'll give me time." I haven't written back yet, but I didn't throw it away either. Helen has become family in the truest sense. The aunt I never knew I needed, the ally I didn't know I had. We have dinner every Sunday. She tells me stories about my grandfather, about the father my dad could have been if he'd made different choices. My coworker Daniel asked me the other day, "Any regrets about all of this?" I thought about it for a long time. "No," I finally said. "For 32 years I lived someone else's story. I followed a script I didn't know existed. But now?" I smiled. "Now I'm finally writing my own. And honestly, it's the first story I've ever wanted to read. I've spent a lot of time with my therapist trying to understand how my family got so broken. Not to forgive, though maybe that will come eventually, but to make sense of it, to make sure I don't carry these patterns into my own future. Here's what I've learned. My father was what therapists call a narcissistic controller. He grew up as an only child, given everything he wanted, and learned to see the world as a zero-sum game. More for someone else meant less for him. When I was born, I wasn't a daughter. I was a threat to the resources he'd earmarked for Meredith. His response wasn't hatred exactly. It was colder than that. It was calculated dismissal. My mother was a victim of what experts call coercive control. She married into money from nothing, and my father systematically isolated her from any independence. Financial, social, emotional. When he told her to treat me coldly, she didn't have the resources to resist. That doesn't make it okay, but it helps me understand why she couldn't protect me, even when she wanted to. Meredith was the golden child, placed on a pedestal so high she couldn't see the ground anymore. She was taught from birth that she deserved everything, and I deserved nothing. It wasn't cruelty, it was programming. When you're raised to believe the world revolves around you, watching your sister suffer feels normal. And me, I was the scapegoat, the one who absorbed the family's dysfunction so everyone else could pretend everything was fine. My biggest weakness was hope. The desperate, irrational hope that if I just tried harder, loved better, sacrificed more, I would finally earn my place. But here's the thing about earning love. You can't. Love isn't a wage. It isn't something you deserve based on merit. It's something that should be given freely. And when it's not, that's not your failure. That's theirs. The lesson I want to leave you with is simple. You are not responsible for the dysfunction you were born into, but you are responsible for whether you carry it forward. I chose to break the cycle. You can too. So that's my story. Not a revenge tale, though I know it might sound like one. This was never about destroying my family or taking everything they had. It was about truth. About 32 years of silence finally breaking. About a woman who spent her whole life being invisible, choosing to be seen. My father wrote that letter expecting it would never be found. He kept that journal believing his secrets would die with him. He spent decades building a version of our family where I didn't count. But here I am, still standing, still speaking, still refusing to disappear. If my story taught me anything, it's this. The people who try to make you feel small are usually the ones most afraid of what you'll become when you stand up. So stand up, even when it's terrifying, even when everyone tells you to keep quiet, even when the people who should love you most are the ones holding you down. Your worth was never theirs to decide. Thank you for staying with me until the end. I mean it, really. If this story touched you, hit that like button. It helps more people find these videos, and I promise there are others out there who need to hear this. If you want more stories like this one, subscribe and click the notification bell. I've linked some of my other videos in the description. And if you have your own story, whether you're ready to share it or not, leave a comment. Let me know you're out there. Let me know you're fighting too. Take care of yourself, okay? And remember, you were always worthy. You always have been.